Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack here at the Irish Hotspur. And in this video, I'm going to be taking a deep dive into some of our goalkeeping troubles this season. And also, I'm going to be asking some harsh as well as some annoying, you might say, Captain Hindsight kind of type questions in this video, everybody. And those questions are: could Antonio Conte have dropped Hugo Lloris for the likes of Fraser Forster sooner? Could that have maybe saved him some points in the Premier League table? Maybe it could have saved him his job, but I don't know. It really is just the question is could maybe we be in a better position in the Premier League table, considering some of the errors that we will be detailing by Hugo Lloris this season, everybody? Just that's the question I want to have in your mind. And also the other question I want you to keep in mind as well, everybody, is would it be a mistake actually to bring Hugo back into the 11, considering, we have a new manager, we're looking for a new manager bounce as well as sort of a fresh start here? Is it the right choice to bring Hugo Lloris back into the 11, especially if maybe, for example, one of the things that we will be detailing in this is it maybe if a goalkeeper is being asked to do a lot with their feet, if maybe the distribution aspect is going to be, in high demand, from this manager, is Hugo Lloris the right guy to be bringing into the fold again, everybody? So let me know. Keep those two questions in mind, everybody. But before we get into it, make sure to smash that like button if you do enjoy this video, and also make sure to get your comments in down below whether you think Fraser Forster could actually or should have maybe come in sooner for the likes of Hugo Lloris. And also put down everybody down below. Everybody put your comments, your thoughts, your opinions on whether I'm actually just being too harsh in this video. Please, everybody, I'll take any type of opinion. And I also understand that my opinion on goalkeepers doesn't exactly really come from any sort of expertise or anything. But also as well, everybody, let's try to get this to 100 likes to it, please, if we can. That'd be an absolute massive help to the channel. Now, I understand also, everybody, that Hugo has been a servant to this club and is a very cherished player by many Spurs fans. And I also understand in this video that I will not be detailing any of the great saves that Hugo has made this season. But maybe at the end of this video, I do hope that maybe your opinion on Hugo's season might be changed, maybe altered, or also could be even validated in some shape or form. But regardless, though, please, again, do give me your thoughts down below on Hugo's season and whether you actually do think he should come back into the fold with the new manager that might be coming in. Even with Ryan Mason as an interim manager, let me know if you think it's a good idea to bring Hugo back into it, everybody. And also, everybody, I'm going to kind of get a bit of a warm up here on kind of a bit of a quick stats sort of session here, because it does maybe help us sort of think about maybe where we're coming from on sort of the errors as well as some of the mistakes that Hugo Lloris has made this season. According to FB he should have only conceded around 25 goals this season over 21 matches played in the Premier League. But in fact, he conceded 29 goals thus far and is one of the lowest post-shot expected goals per shot on target among all goalkeepers in the Premier League. So it does seem like, according to FB at least, that Hugo Lloris has, allowed 4 more goals than they've even expected. And what you actually want is for it to be the opposite. Maybe someone like Jose Sa last season would be a really good example, who I believe had like a post shot expected goals of some high number, let's say like 27 or 28, but his actual goals allowed were something around like 25 or 21 or something like that, like something way below the actual expected goals that they did expect him to concede. But Hugo is kind of a bit of the opposite in that case. And also, if you're going to be looking for maybe another sort of stat that seems to really not put Hugo Lloris in any sort of glory here, is also if you do go into PremierLeague.com, and here's the proof right here. If you look at by errors leading to goals by any player in any position across the Premier League, Hugo Lloris there, everybody, is still leading the charts when it comes to it. So again, this is kind of a good, decent warm up, if you will, when it does come to where maybe our speculation, or at least my speculation, is sort of coming from. And then, everybody, in this section, we're going to be kind of taking a deeper dive into some of the errors this season by Hugo Lloris. We're going to be actually looking at some of the more high profile errors and also maybe some of the less high profile errors, but trying to maybe look at trends as well as maybe patterns in some of the mistakes and errors that he's been making. At some stage, you probably might think I'm being way too harsh, or at some stage, you might think I'm probably validating something that you've been seeing with Hugo Lloris. Regardless, though, everybody, do want you to let me know down below, everybody, what your thoughts are again on any of these moments that I do pick out here, because that's the whole point. It's just to be picking out moments that do maybe have probably gotten forgotten, or also as well I think do maybe show a bit of a pattern that is in Hugo's game at this moment in time. But we start off with West Ham here, everybody, and he has plenty of time on the ball here. And this is the 1-1 away draw that we had from West Ham in the beginning of the season. He has plenty of time on the ball right here, everybody, to make the right decision. I think he's allowed to take maybe 2 to 3 touches on it. And instead of maybe picking one of the easier options that he has available to him here, Hugo Lloris, I think he has Ben Davies right here in this scenario. Instead, he chooses a much harder one and he goes for the likes of Perisic and he misses him completely, just hits it way off. And of course, it leads to a goal here. And this is more, the goal conceded is maybe more to do with Perisic, kind of falling asleep from the throw in here. I think Højbjerg really falls asleep on this play as well. I think Basuma too. I mean, the whole defense, let's be honest, do fall asleep from this throw in that Souček eventually scores. But at the same time, it does start from a moment where Spurs are under no pressure at all. And Spurs actually really shouldn't be giving it away and they shouldn't be giving possession so unnecessarily. And so Hugo does have to maybe take some blame, I think, in this goal concede, in my opinion. But after we find ourselves 1-1 and we have blown the lead and we have blown a potential London Derby win, he actually almost concedes another goal here, Hugo Lloris, from his poor distribution. And this is another back pass that he receives. It comes from Ivan Perisic, and it's not really hit great. He leaves it a little short. You can even see him, I think, either motioning just to clear it or just motioning, you kind of apologizing for him leaving it a little short. But Hugo, instead of just getting it cleared and clearing his lines here, for some reason and for some strange reason, he decides to kind of take a touch here and take it inside. But Jared Bowen is actually able to read it quite well in this moment, and that he kind of pays the price for it, Hugo Lloris, for deciding to take a touch. And Jared Bowen reads him, and Hugo panics in this stage and just sort of tries to play it out of play, but instead of even knocking it, high and out of play, he just tries to knock it over to the corner, maybe trying to play Perisic here. Jared Bowen takes like a slight touch on it, a slight deflection, sort of starts dribbling out. Perisic, instead of maybe shielding it and letting it go out, I guess, for maybe a corner or maybe a goal kick, I guess, he decides to touch it and he loses possession, actually gets picked by the likes of Antonio, and they almost score from across, I think, right there to the likes of Jared Bowen. And Hugo Lloris's confusion as can be seen here after that play. Another good example that we're going to go through sort of quickly here is Sporting in that 2-0 defeat away from home that we had. This comes from a Pedro Porro chance here, everybody, and it's an absolutely fabulous hit, left-footed hit actually from Pedro, and he makes a crack save here, Hugo Lloris, a really brilliant save. And all I really want to point out actually from this is because we do know, everybody, that we do concede actually right after this save from Hugo Lloris. And I think part of the reason that we do concede is because Hugo Lloris, instead of maybe telling his players that, and reminding his players that they need to stay switched on, there's a point, here maybe at play, maybe 3 points still here at play. He kind of takes a lot of the plaudits and a lot of the compliments from his players. And instead of sort of like screaming at them and being that captain and reminding them, that they nearly did concede there. And I know a lot of people don't really like Jordan Pickford, but in this example, do hear me out. Like, whether you like him or not, he would have been screaming his face off at his players in that moment had he made a save like that to keep his team 0-0. And it just feels like Hugo Lloris did not do the same, and he didn't really show that leadership in that moment in time. And then we end up conceding from the corner, and instead of, again, maybe being a leader and maybe having positive body language, he throws his hands up at his teammates. And I don't know, in my opinion, and despite, not really playing a major role in it, he doesn't play a good role in that, at least when it comes to the leadership department, in my opinion. Leicester City 6-2. So the reason I'm kind of bringing this one up here, everybody, is just more because Hugo Lloris, he does well by saving it, but then you realize in the screenshot, he's just well off the line. But the point I'm trying to bring up with it is that Hugo Lloris actually, when we did see Fraser Forster make a save, he was able to stay well on his line against the likes of Nottingham Forest. But also after the World Cup, Hugo Lloris did mock as well as ridicule the likes of Emi Martinez in his penalty shootout sort of antics, as well as penalty saving style. And Hugo Lloris said that he would never do that himself. And he didn't really, I think, in any stage sort of like cover himself in glory, I think, in that penalty shootout. I don't know if he even made one save during that penalty shootout. And he also really did look quite poor during some of them. He really did not get down well. And so for him to criticize Emiliano Martinez, who did actually do quite well in that World Cup final, especially in the shootout, it's just, again, a bit sort of speaks to Hugo's cockiness or sort of arrogance, and also maybe just a bad sort of sport, I think, at least in my opinion. But I'm probably going too far, at least at that stage. And like I said, always feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Now we go on to Arsenal, the 3-1 defeat in the North London derby away from home. It does get painful at this stage here, everybody, but it is a moment where we find Bukayo Saka, of course, out on the wing, and he cuts inside on the likes of Perisic. He's able to fire a shot from a very dangerous position here, and this shot comes right in towards Hugo Lloris. Hugo Lloris, it kind of looks like it is actually a pretty easy save. He sticks sort of a very stiff right arm at it. And what I would say is that maybe it could have been hard to probably catch it completely, but he could have found an easier place to maybe parry it to. Bounces kind of sort of right in front of him, as you can tell from that angle. Again, another sort of angle to prove that it's not exactly, headed towards the bottom quarter or anything. It's actually headed right towards him. Doesn't really do too well with it, and the fact that he sticks a very like awkward right arm towards it, and it ends up going straight for Romero. Gabriel Jesus is sort of kind of anticipating this kind of mistake here as the striker that he is. Romero, in my opinion, actually does quite well to somehow give this back to the likes of Hugo Lloris, and he's able to, I think, hit it off his knee, sort of back to Hugo, and then it's a pretty easy catch from here, actually, from Romero, and Hugo somehow doesn't really make the catch, and it's not really, I guess it happens, right? It's all part of the game sometimes. Like, it's an easy catch, it's an easy save. He doesn't make it, right. It just slips right from underneath him, and Gabriel Jesus scores. And problem is that too, this also happens right after we did just score a goal in the end of the first half. And this is, of course, the beginning of the second half. So we found ourselves in a pretty good position here to maybe get, a type of upset, to maybe have a bit of a psychological sort of, edge over the likes of Arsenal, because, of course, they were panicking probably more so than us. And we lose it quite quickly because of this easy mistake here, I think, from Hugo. And at the end of the day, everybody, you do have to sort of see past the mistakes, right? You have to see past them, but it's really hard to when you see him throw his arms up at his teammates afterwards. And it's really not, in my opinion, a nice touch from our captain at this football club, everybody, because you don't want to be seeing this, because he is culpable in this mistake. He is a culprit in it. And to see him throw his arms up at his teammates, to see this sort of body language, I just don't think reflects really what we want to be seeing from the captain of our football club, everybody. And to really just point further, maybe if you think it's only just one image, he continues to sort of gesture towards his teammates, just sort of kind of make a bit of a fit here, I think, Hugo, making faces, just sort of, I don't know, whatever he's saying to himself or saying to his teammates, it's just not the right body language. It doesn't, poise the right type of mentality, right? Because we are at this stage, it's a bad mistake from him, but we are only 2-1 down. But the issue is that he's not showing any accountability. And then also, he's kind of breeding a toxic energy, at least in my opinion, to the rest of the team. And I think that contributes to the rest of this defeat in the North London derby, is because we're getting a bad sort of vibe and negativity from our captain. And also, he's not really showing much accountability either, which certainly doesn't help, in my opinion. I do think we have to move on, though, to Eintracht Frankfurt. And this is something that I need to bring up with Hugo's mistakes as well this season, is that while this is a terrible mistake from Dyer, he has an absolutely shocking touch, as you can see here, that Lindstrom is able to take from him. But Hugo in this moment is, he's thinking the right thing. He sees Kolo Muani there making that run, and he probably does have to try to maybe either stay in his net and hope that his defenders can do the job, or he's going to have to try to parry it away or punch it away. And he wobbles towards it. He's a bit slow to get there, at least in my opinion, he was. And he punches it, but he doesn't really get any sort of umph on it. And it also doesn't really go anywhere to any sort of safe area at all, right? It doesn't really go maybe towards, I guess, maybe Dyer. It's hard to say, but it just doesn't really do well with it. In fact, in my opinion, I think he actually makes the initial chance a bit easier, because he punches it to the likes of Rhoda. He also takes out, his own player in the process, kind of takes himself out in the process and leaves an empty net. Rhoda cleverly slides it across to Kamada, who just has an easy goal kind of right in front of him. And I think this does sort of come from the fact that Hugo decides to come out and punch it. But when you do abandon your net in that situation, you do hope that you punch it well, and you do have to punch it to the right safe area so that you can get back into your net and not make it as easy of a goal as it was. Another example here, I think, comes from a Rafael Borre long shot, and it's a very savable long shot that eventually, weirdly, does lead to a corner, and it bounces right in front of Hugo here, everybody, and it's a very, very savable shot, and somehow he, I guess, like just sort of like chests it out for a corner in this position, and then we end up conceding from that corner from what seemed to be a safe 3-1 position, and then it ended up being 3-2, and it had to be a bit of a sketchy sort of finish, everybody. So that also again comes from, I think, Hugo, has a bit of a handprint, in my opinion, on a lot of these goals, at least in my opinion. Man United 2-0. This is where it's a funny one where you probably do think, again, Jack is being quite harsh here. But the reason why I probably say I'm not is because we do end up, I think, starting well in this game. At least I remember starting quite decently in this match. But we start to all of a sudden lose a bit of the psychological edge. And we also kind of start to drop deeper and deeper and deeper to the point that we just had stood no chance of winning it. Did start to lose that edge is because of this mistake that comes from Hugo Lloris actually in the very, very beginning of the game here. And it's a ball in behind for Rashford that comes in for Fred. And Doherty actually does quite well here to defend it, and he's able to clear it away. But for some reason, Hugo, I guess, is thinking he needs to clear. He beelines it towards Rashford for no reason at all. I don't know why he thinks he's going to get there. Doherty makes a decent clearance of it. It kind of comes towards Anthony. Anthony, I guess, sees that Hugo Lloris is out of his goal, goes for an audacious effort here to try to lob him. And it's a really poor one, actually. It's a poor attempt at it. And it's quite an easy catch here, as you can tell, for the likes of Hugo Lloris. But somehow, some way, he nearly actually concedes from this, everybody. And it's such an easy catch, as you can tell. Just from the reason I do point this mistake out is because I do feel like a nervous goalkeeper makes the rest of the team nervous. It certainly at least makes the rest of the backline nervous. We already don't have a strong backline to begin with, everybody. We move on to Newcastle, where we lost 2-1 at home in this match here, everybody. And don't really need to explain much of this one. It's obviously long ball and behind for Callum Wilson. Dyer doesn't really track the run too well, but Hugo is way too slow to come out and doesn't know what to do with it when it does bounce up at him here, everybody. And I feel like it's just poor all around from him. It really is poor from Dyer because I know he can do a lot better to try to save it off the line. But as we know, this is a pretty high profile mistake that we obviously have seen. And I don't think anybody can really have much debate over it about, whether it's, anybody's fault. It's obviously Hugo, again, who has a huge handprint on this goal conceded. But I do actually point out the other goal that we do concede. And I think the other goal we conceded in this match also, Hugo has a huge part to play in here as well. It's the 40th minute. We're still 1-0 down. And Lloris, I feel like, again, it's a theme. Maybe has all the options in the world, but decides to go for one of the harder options. And Longley, obviously, in my opinion, is much better on the ball. He decides to pick out Sessegnon here, really underhits it and really misses him. And Longstaff knocks it down to Almiron. And I know Longley doesn't do well from here. He really gets beat quite easily. But I do feel like the effort from Almiron is actually not that great. Like it's a good goal in the fact that he takes it past a lot of our players. But Hugo, the way that he comes out here, he actually doesn't really do well to get down low enough, I think. And he actually shows a lot of the goal, I believe, as well, because you can see where Almiron finishes it. He actually finishes it right underneath Hugo here. And I don't know, it goes in the middle, right? It goes in the middle of the goal. It doesn't go into kind of the side netting. He doesn't really like curl it around him and underneath him into the side netting or anything. Doesn't like, chip it over him of any kind. It goes underneath him into the middle of the goal. I just think that's probably, of any of the places that he could have finished it, maybe one of the ones that you would think that Hugo probably could have saved, at least in my opinion. And then also as well, like I said, the original reason that we were under that pressure was because of his poor distribution in the first place. Another reason, or another kind of sort of theme that I do want to bring out, it comes in the sporting game, and it's something that I want to go through quickly, of course, but Hugo, I feel like, has shown that he can be slow to get down, like maybe Fraser Forster has been plenty criticized for. A lot of people say Fraser Forster doesn't get down quick enough. You could probably say they both don't get down quick enough, because I remember this Marcus Edwards goal bounces plenty, and it really wasn't exactly hit with a lot of force or anything. It was well placed, but I feel like, again, it was just one where Hugo was caught a bit by surprise. And if you do think I'm being too harsh, the Champions League commentator said that, yeah, Hugo was actually caught by surprise. So it just sort of two people kind of validating the thought there, if you needed to know. And I feel like this also kind of falls in the realm of the theme of the fact that Hugo, the world class shot stopping Hugo of the past, definitely would have saved that. The Hugo Lloris of now, I don't think is a world class shot stopper anymore. This one is one that I think you should dwell on. It's kind of another one of the more high profile mistakes, and it comes from a Douglas Luiz effort from distance. And while you maybe thought I was being harsh on his sort of saving ability from distance, it comes from Douglas Luiz, bounces obviously right in front of him here, quite an easy and standard save. Somehow he lets it spill and kind of cough right in front of him here. It's again, right in the middle of the goal, right in front of him. And it's also, again, also fresh off coming back from the World Cup here, everybody. It spills. Ollie Watkins able to take it past him. And then I think he slides it to Emi Buendia there for the goal. But this is fresh coming off back of the World Cup as well. And he was rested the game before this. And I do feel like this is maybe this stage of the season where perhaps Antonio Conte could have considered probably putting in Fraser Forster ahead of the likes of Hugo Lloris. And I understand it's maybe an unlikely or an unrealistic sort of move to make because it's a lot of sort of politics involved with it. But I do feel like Hugo wasn't having great form going into the World Cup, and then maybe you could say he was okay during it, but he didn't exactly have good form for Spurs. And I feel like everybody knew that another mistake was coming. And it came literally in his first game right after coming back from the World Cup. And it's the opening goal as well. It's at home to Aston Villa. And it's another long shot that he doesn't do very well with. Of course, another North London derby that Hugo did have his handprints on and did have his influence on when it comes to the goals conceded. Again, this is sort of, you look at similar stage inside 10 minutes of the game where we do look very nervous in this game. And Doherty plays a back pass here to Hugo. Martinelli is able to close down Doherty, close down Hugo here, and he does have plenty of time. I think Hugo somehow, I guess, dwells on it or doesn't really think Martinelli is closing him down as quickly as he does, and ends up actually getting kind of picked here. It sort of like scuffs over to Longley. Longley has to sort of clear it, doesn't do very well with it, gets blocked, and it sort of just shoots into the air, everybody, and then it sort of doesn't go much of anywhere, and it actually bounces down here to the likes of Martinelli. Martinelli is able to flick it over his head to the likes of Nketiah. Nketiah misses a really good chance actually to score inside the first 10 minutes, and it all starts from Hugo Lloris's distribution issues, in my opinion. And we'd now go actually to the goal that we do concede, and it's a really, really bad near post goal that he concedes, as we all know from this one, everybody. I mean, Sessegnon shows him down to the end line, and Hugo Lloris, look at his position. It seems like everything is normal. His players around him, it should be completely fine. Takes a tiny deflection, I think. I'm not even sure if it does. And Hugo Lloris, it hits him in the chest, hits him in the face, and that ends up being an own goal. But regardless of really diving into the poor save that he makes there and the own goal of it, you just have to look at where it's body language. It's just bad, bad, bad leadership from him, in my opinion, here. And just don't really get how he can throw his arms up at anybody. I don't get why he's throwing his arms up at Sessegnon. I don't get why he's throwing his arms up at his teammates here in this situation. And I feel like, again, this is our captain in a North London derby, and he's throwing his arms up at his teammates, throwing his arms up at everyone else, and he's showing no accountability. It just shows absolute no class, in my opinion. And again, it's just only him, and especially this one was only him and only his mistake. And I don't know why it is that he's throwing his arms up so much at his teammates in this opinion. I just don't get it. It really is just a lack of leadership from him, and it's just seeing the captain's armband on him right there is just what makes me more upset about it. Just such poor body language, such poor mentality, and I think it contributes to us going on to lose games as well when you see this from your captain and you see no accountability shown, and also him basically blaming others for his own mistakes. Further evidence for it, like if you didn't need it, there's further evidence for him gesturing towards Sessegnon for some reason. Another kind of example, maybe how slow he's been kind of reacting to long shots. This was Martin Odegaard's effort, of course, in the first half, and comes from maybe a closer area than than Marcus Edwards, but again, it looked like a pretty savable one to Hugo. It didn't really exactly have a lot of venom behind it. Side netting, everybody. It didn't go into the side netting at all, and I think if it were a well-placed finish, it would have probably have gone into the side netting. And, I could be pretty harsh here, but I think it does fall in line of maybe the theme of Hugo Lloris kind of getting down a bit slowly, kind of like what maybe a lot of people have criticized Fraser Forster for. I think they both kind of get down a bit slowly. Man City, this is the 4-2 defeat, where we found ourselves, of course, with a glorious 2-0 position at halftime. This is inside the first half here, everybody, where Rodri plays a ball into Erling Haaland, and Hugo Lloris, he has no chance of getting to this here, everybody. It's poor defending from Romero and Dyer here. But Hugo Lloris somehow thinks he can get there, doesn't. Erling Haaland wins the header, and he nearly scores. Probably should have scored, actually. And so wouldn't have probably have been 2-0 up had actually Erling Haaland not missed that easier chance. But the goal that we do end up conceding again is comes inside, pretty early in the second half. And it's another theme I feel like is that we do concede goals really early in the second half. And Hugo Lloris definitely has had his part to play in that in plenty of occasions. And it comes from a cross here from Riyad Mahrez, loops in here for the likes of Gundogan. Eric Dyer sort of wins the header, and it sort of like shoots up into the air. Jack Grealish definitely fancies himself, as you can tell by sort of his body position and the way he's sort of lining up for it. He definitely fancies himself to try to win this. And you can see also as well that Emerson probably fancies that he's going to win it because Emerson's lunging for it to try to block it. Hugo comes out to punch it, but it ends up being kind of a bit of a similar moment to Eintracht Frankfurt, where if you're going to come out and punch it and you're going to come out and parry it, you better do it convincingly and you better not knock it into the danger area. That's exactly what he does. He knocks it into the danger area. He knocks it into Julian Alvarez, I believe, here. And Julian Alvarez is able to make a pretty easy finish of it with an open net. And he takes out his defender, Emerson. He takes himself out of the play where then it's an open net. And like I said, if you're going to come out and punch it, especially if it's not maybe 100% that you're going to get there, you better do it convincingly. I think in any case, you always better do it convincingly, I guess, regardless, because if you're going to be leaving an open net, you have to do it and you have to do it well. And so, yeah, it just sort of was similar, I think, to the Eintracht Frankfurt goal that we ended up conceding here, everybody. Another one that you have to look at too is I think another near post goal that he ends up conceding. This is when Real Mahrez is taking on Ben Davies, and he has a left-footed effort or right-footed effort, excuse me, his weak foot, Real Mahrez, and it takes like a tiny bit of I think a deflection off the bottom of Ben Davies' stud, but Hugo, as we know, doesn't really do too well to react to it and lets in another near post goal. And I think what's funny is that, not really funny, it's actually quite torturous, it happens right after the North London Derby near post goal that he conceded, the own goal, right? And it doesn't really seem like it'd be much of a coincidence that this happens 2 times in a row. I think it does speak again to Hugo not being the world-class shot stopper that he once was. And he lets this in here. And I think, again, what's maybe more important, and maybe if you need another angle, there it is. But it's just the body language once again here, everybody. That's what I feel like has made me want to dive into this more than anything. It's just been the way that he has reacted to a lot of the goals that he has conceded that have a huge part to play in on his part. And he seems to really not take any sort of accountability whatsoever. And here's another moment of him sort of gesturing towards his teammates. Now, I picked a lot of games that he's made mistakes in. In fact, I picked 11 games that he's made mistakes in. But these are the ones that I have left out from this season. Forster was, in fact, healthy, of course, during plenty of these mistakes. And he played 4 games this season. So you would rule out 4 of the games from this season that Hugo was not actually playing in, that Spurs have either won or whatever. And then clean sheets, there have been 6 clean sheets. And those were, of course, either games that Hugo did brilliantly in that I probably will not acknowledge or will acknowledge in this video, or as well, maybe games that he didn't really have much to do with maybe in the first place. And then games where I really felt like he had nothing he could do were around 7 games. So a total of around 17 games. So 7 games where I felt like there was nothing he could do, 6 games where there were clean sheets, and then 4 games where it was Fraser Forster that came in before Hugo was hurt and before Hugo picked up that injury. But these are some bad themes actually in Hugo's games that I feel like have hurt us. These are sort of the themes that I'm sort of picking out from all these mistakes. And I do feel like he's very shaky and inconsistent in possession, as you can obviously maybe tell from some of the things I've picked out. You can't count on him clearly for a good first touch, or can you really count on him for a reliable touch? I think in general, there have been plenty of moments when he had plenty of time on the ball and he somehow actually makes a big mess of it. I feel like a good example of that would have been West Ham on two different occasions. And also, it feels like he tries to make it harder on himself. A good example, West Ham, maybe Newcastle too, with the Sessegnon, trying to hit it out to him. He tries to make it harder on himself where he has players next to him that he could try to get it to, that he could sort of maybe, give the burden of possession to, like a Longley or like a Romero that are better than him on the ball. But instead, he tries to make it harder on himself by picking out a wingback or picking out a midfielder or whatever, and he doesn't hit it consistently and ends up missing it. And when you do miss those, you run the chance of putting yourself under further pressure. And so that's something I'm also not really liking about his distribution. And he also never plays first time passes. Obviously, something that I see a lot from Fraser Forster that I'm very thankful for. But Hugo Lloris never plays first time passes. And if he did, it would probably take him out of a lot of the pressure that he puts himself under. And I feel like the reason he doesn't play those first time passes is because he probably can't, and because he may be too scared to make them right now because he doesn't back himself in possession. He has a bad habit too, I think, of getting it launched to an isolated Harry Kane after spells of pressure, which I feel like ultimately do put us under further pressure, because when you are just getting it launched unnecessarily from a, like a save or whatever, and he's drop kicking it to Kane in an isolated position where there's tons of defenders around him, it just puts us under further pressure, and it really doesn't help whatsoever. I don't think he's a leader either. When asked about some of the mistakes that we have detailed this season here, or in this video here, everybody, when asked about some of those mistakes he's made this season, he defended his errors and said he felt like he couldn't do actually any better. He doubled down on it, which I think what's bad about that is that it doesn't really, again, show any sort of accountability whatsoever on his behalf. And if you were to also compare that to Sonny's interviews on his own struggles, he's been actually quite forthcoming and actually quite acknowledging of his own struggles and been able to put his hand up on, a few occasions. I've heard Sonny in plenty of interviews when it comes to his own mistakes or struggles this season. And I feel like Sonny has plenty more of an excuse than Hugo does, but Hugo has actually had no excuse, or is also really not able to sort of take any accountability for it whatsoever, whereas Sonny would. And I think another reason why this is poor form from Hugo is that he is the captain, and you would think a captain would be able to show some sense of accountability and some sense of humility as well. He has terrible, terrible body language. That's another reason why I don't think he's a good leader. He's air gesturing towards his teammates after goals that he's conceded, that he's played a major part in, or even goals that, let's be honest, were basically entirely his fault. We have images here, and we've shown you images of him air gesturing towards his teammates. And he's also making faces at them as well, which I just really don't appreciate. And these, of course, maybe if you were to, again, maybe think of examples, happened in both times against Arsenal on both North London derbies on two separate occasions. He conceded a goal that he definitely had a huge part to play in, and then his air gesturing towards his teammates, throwing his arms up, making faces and whatnot. And I do feel like it contributes to us then going on to lose those games, because when he's not showing any sort of accountability and he's not really being the right sort of, like, come on, lads, we can pull ourselves together here type attitude, it doesn't really help in any regard. And especially him wearing the captain's armband certainly doesn't set a right example either. He throws his arms up also after mistakes he's made or even has a huge part to play in. So like I said, no accountability whatsoever, and no longer, I feel like, a world-class shot stopper here as well, everybody. That's another theme I kind of have brought up here. Since he was never really good with his feet ever, Hugo Lloris, I understand he's from that generation where they weren't really trained to be, but once that shot stopping ability goes, that does mean that I feel like the rest of his game will start to dip and wane quite quickly. I feel like when it goes, you'll start to look like a very average goalkeeper, even less than average goalkeeper, very quickly. Whereas if you did maybe have a bit of distribution skills, might not be as obvious because you don't have to put yourself under pressure nearly as much. He's making more errors, I do feel like, with his feet that are costing us goals than he is able to make up for it with world-class saves. I think a good example of that would be like a Nick Pope, somebody who is really bad with his feet, but is making up for it. Really great save. So I don't feel like Hugo is really exactly doing that if you were to look for a comparison. And also, in fact, I feel like he's letting in really bad near post goals far too often as well. And I don't think they're happening in any sort of, unlucky sort of way. I do feel like it's not a coincidence that they happen back to back scenarios, like in the North London Derby against Arsenal and then against Man City right afterwards as well. And I do feel like he's had some questionable efforts at trying to save shots from distance. You look at Frankfurt, which led to a corner we concede. You look at Arsenal against Odegaard. You look at Sporting with the Marcus Edwards one. Then you also look at the Douglas Luiz one, which is probably one of the best examples of it, where really just no excuse to not be able to just catch that one. And also, if you're looking at some of the bad decisions he's made too, and some of the bad judgments he's made that have come back to his own detriment, I definitely think of Eintracht Frankfurt, and I think of Newcastle, when it just shows that when he's either thinking about coming out of his own goal or he's thinking about to come to punch it, just doesn't really make the right decision, or he doesn't even do very well with it, I think, in the first place. But what are some things actually that I'm seeing from Forster? Maybe what are the benefits actually of having Forster in right now instead of the likes of Hugo Lloris? I feel like he's light years better in possession. He can actually make a first time pass, simple as, end of story. I think that's saving us tremendously when anytime teams press us. The fact that he can make a first time pass makes it a whole lot harder on them to put us under pressure. He also has far better clearances, I think, too, when we need to clear it. And he can actually pick out players, it looks like, when we need to clear it. And I've seen him do it with both feet, actually, as well. He has far better sort of presence, I think, from set pieces, too. And he also has that height, that frame, that build. And he doesn't really get bullied either. I mean, can't really have somebody stand underneath him and push him around or anything, like, because he's just way too big for that sort of thing. We already struggle from set pieces as it is. So I feel like anything sort of helps when it comes to us being able to defend them better. He's also made, I think, yes, some pretty poor saves where, yeah, he's parried it back into the danger area, or he didn't really do very well with the initial save, right? But I feel like, as we've seen from some of the evidence in this video, that Hugo hasn't exactly covered himself in glory either on plenty of saves. And like I say, doesn't, in my opinion, have that sort of world-class shot-stopping ability anymore. So I feel like we can maybe just shake hands and just say maybe they're both not great shot stoppers, but Forster makes up for it with being so much better in possession than Hugo, and he doesn't put us under further pressure like Hugo does. Also, Forster, I feel like, doesn't really let in the same near post goals, at least from what we've seen so far, that Hugo Lloris has as well. With Hugo out, though, I feel like we can finally also, too, have a better captain and at least a better mentality from our captain. Now, I understand Harry Kane isn't everybody's favorite captain, but I feel like Hugo Lloris, just in so many different manners, like I've highlighted, did not set the standard for what should be a good captain of Tottenham Hotspur. And with him being out, and if we continue to leave him out, that means we don't have to make him captain anytime further. So that's another thing to consider if you didn't want to have Hugo as goalkeeper. When Hugo does come back, though, everybody, Forster should keep his place, in my opinion. And if he doesn't, I do expect similar errors as well as mistakes leading to goals to creep back into our game. The boldest statement I could make is that if Forster were given a chance after his mistakes against Newcastle, like I say, after the World Cup, comes back in versus Brentford, and if he were to maybe play in that game after Brentford, I believe it was the Aston Villa mistake against Douglas Luiz, if he was able to play thereafter, I predict he actually could have saved us 9 points. I think the errors against Aston Villa wouldn't have happened. The errors against Arsenal and the North London Derby might not have happened. And also the errors against Man City would not have happened when we were 2-0 up at that stage as well, everybody. So just something to consider if maybe Fraser Forster, if you were looking for an opportune time to bring him back in. But do let me know, everybody, whether you think Fraser Forster has been a savior for us this season. And let me know if you do disagree at any stage on my critiques of our previous number one goalkeeper, Hugo Lloris. Hit that like button, everybody, on the way out. Let's try to get this to 100 likes if we can, and I will be seeing ya. Come on, you Spurs. Everywhere we go.